Magnificent. That would be the word I would use to describe this episode and this entire segment. I think we were all trying to ready ourselves for this segment of the episode to be animated by Vincent, a very legendary animator at this point. But even with me going into this episode and knowing that I was about to see absolute cinema, I was still not ready for just how magnificent this episode actually was from start to finish. I would hands down say that this animated sequence, this full minute animated sequence, is probably the best animated scene of all of ReZero, thus far. Like, I mean, this could obviously be recency bias. I would really have to go back and look at everything of ReZero, but in terms of just, like, action, like, if we're just strictly talking about action and movement and fluid nature of the character acting, I would probably say that this is the best animated sequence, which, go figure. Vincent is a very legendary animator. I mean, right now on Twitter, he's trending. Like, I mean, you literally see, you know, he's trending, people are talking about it, everybody. You have people that don't even watch ReZero, basically, talking about, you know, this episode. So I think it is exactly what I expected. I talked about it yesterday that a lot of people today was going to be talking about this segment of ReZero, even people that are not necessarily fans of ReZero, those that don't actively participate in it and maybe only watch Shonen, they're going to dive into the conversation today because Vincent was working on it. And as a reminder who Vincent is, he's an animator that's really made quite a name for himself over the past few years. He's been mainly working on One Piece, but he's worked on a few other series, like, for instance, Jujutsu Kaisen is a very good example. He worked on the infamous Sukuna moment where, you know, he does his domain expansion. He's a very well-known animator. So, obviously, it makes a lot of sense why this scene is creating a lot of buzz, why a lot of people are talking about it, because, I mean, it is just simply a fantastic and beautiful segment. I mean, the movement of the hands, the body, it's just, it's something else, dude. It really just stands out. But, before I get ahead of myself, I obviously want to address the second half of the title, which is me saying pathetic. Now, let's explain. I'm not saying that this episode is pathetic. I'm not saying this episode is bad. In fact, I say this episode is fantastic. It's almost as close to perfection as you could possibly get in terms of adapting the source material. Obviously, if I really want to rip it apart and get into the nitty-gritty, there probably is some small content cut throughout this episode, but overall, in terms of adaptation, this elevated the original source to an entirely different level with the animated sequence. Like, this entire fight with, like, Garfield and all that, basically, this is pretty much how it went in the light novel, and obviously in a light novel, you have the breakdown with the dialogue and stuff explaining what the characters are doing, so obviously you can't have that in an action sequence, but the fist and the way the bodies move in this segment is exactly what happens in the light novel. You can go back and look. Basically, Vincent, when he was cooking up the scene, he definitely went back, or he went to read this part in Arc 5 of ReZero, just where he can get inspiration for adapting this. I appreciate that. It's definitely love and passion for his work and going the extra mile to really make the stuff he works on better than it possibly ever could be. But once again, let's get into the segment of the title where I say pathetic. So, as per usual, Crunchyroll did an oopsie, a yikes, basically. I mean, go figure. I mean, did we really expect anything different at this point? I mean, every single week, Crunchyroll can't help themselves. They mess up in some way, demolish the PR, and destroy ReZero to some degree. Like, I'm just gonna be blunt. I saw a post today, someone posting on my feed, and I agreed with it instantly, because I was like, that's very true. Someone's like, Doom posters, rage baiters, series comparers, shonen bros, animation lovers cannot do nearly enough damage in comparison to what Crunchyroll is currently actively doing to ReZero. Because honestly, Crunchyroll, I feel like they have mastered the craft of really making ReZero look bad, or just doing a very bad PR for it. I mean, today, one of the big things they did was that the episode was delayed, which is a common thing with Crunchyroll, and necessarily, once again, I would give them the benefit of the doubt and let that be a-okay if this was just the one time. But I gotta remind everybody, and it's very important, that every single episode of ReZero Season 3 to this very day now has basically had an issue of some kind, either mistranslation, delays, problems with their titles, all sorts of different stuff. And so once again, we have another issue. And I mean, what Ice here says is pretty much exactly what I think. You know, this is true, like straight up true. How does a multi-billion-dollar company basically mess up this bad? I have no idea. It is legitimately questionable how they can do so bad with their property of ReZero, because once again, this isn't a one-time thing, this has just been a continuous thing. And then Ice also clarifies in this post, basically saying the reason why the episode was delayed today, which to nobody's surprise, was most likely mistranslations. And the reason why is, which is very interesting, is because when the episode came out this morning, it came out briefly, and then it was taken down in a few minutes, and it was no longer available. And thanks to, obviously, torrents and different things like that, people ripped the episode off of Crunchyroll, and people that looked at the Spanish dub, apparently the Spanish dub was extremely inaccurate, it was not what it should be, and Ice talks about this. Now, at this point in time, it's not fully confirmed, but it is heavily implied that Crunchyroll took down the episode, not because they couldn't subtitle it in time, or they didn't receive the episode in time, they took down the episode because there was just clearly bad translations. And once again, now this is the second time that Crunchyroll has acknowledged that there is an inherent issue with the translations of ReZero. And at this point in time, I'm starting to wonder if they're just running their translations through an AI. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm legitimately curious, but regardless of that, yeah, apparently the reason why it was delayed for like 3 to 4 hours today was because of mistranslations, which, to go a little bit more ironic to this whole thing, we also have how they posted the entire fight, or the Vincent segment of the fight, basically, on their YouTube channel, which I can show right here. They posted it, and they posted this clip before the episode was even out today. Like, I want to make sure everybody understands this. So, while Crunchyroll was having issues, and the episode was taken off their platform, and you couldn't legally watch it on their platform, okay? Because they took it off in just a few minutes after it released. They then proceeded, like an hour later, to post a clip, as you can see, the clip of the fight, on YouTube. That's what they did. They posted the clip, and then in this clip, they show the whole fight, which basically is spoilers, because at this point in time, people use Crunchyroll, you're not going to know what's going to happen. You're going to see this appear in your feed, and it just spoils the fight. So, it's just like, Crunchyroll is really bad at, like, advertisement, marketing, and PR for ReZero. They do so much damage to the brand, man. And I think that they're probably now starting to get a lot more flack for it, which I think is why the episode was brought down, because a lot of people are now starting to increase their complaints about it, because it's unacceptable. It is completely unacceptable, and it's pathetic. It's very pathetic for, like, a billion-dollar company to be doing this bad with a property over and over and over and over and over. You get the point, okay? It's non-stop. And obviously, ReZero isn't the only property they've done kind of stuff like this, but it's just like, ReZero isn't a small series, okay? It might not be as popular as, like, Chainsaw Man, Dawn to Dawn, Soul Leveling, you get the point. But it has a dedicated community. It's got 3 seasons. Clearly it's popular, okay? And the fact that they can't manage this property right, man, if I was the bigwigs at the top, like, in Japan, I would cut ties with them. Like, straight up. Like, I would give this product a high dive. I'm gonna be honest. But, anyways, even though we know that's obviously not gonna happen, with that being said, I do want to talk about something else that's pretty amusing about this whole situation. I'll talk about this in a second. I want to talk about this, okay? So, this is something I expected to happen today, but finally, ReZero has been met with the allegations of carried by animation. We can now put it in the same tier as, like, Chainsaw Man, Dawn to Dawn, Fate Stay Night, Demon Slayer, you get the point. Basically, ReZero now has those allegations where people are saying that it's carried by animation, and honestly, it warms my heart. It brings a tear to my eye. It's just like, of all these years, ever since ReZero's been coming out since 2016, I never thought I would see the day I would see allegations like this, but obviously it's happened. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, to be fair, as I've talked about, you have a lot of people that are now talking about ReZero today that are not even necessarily fans of the series. They just like Vincent as an animator, so they're checking out the clip, and they're also fighting action fans, so they're going to check out the clip, and they're going to get a very bad interpretation of what ReZero is about, because anyone that is a fan of ReZero, I think we can all agree, ReZero may have some fights here and there, but it isn't the primary focus. It isn't. And I think that it's going to give a wrong impression to a lot of people that see the clip today, or the segments, and think that's what ReZero is always about. But, anyways, with all that being said, I guess let's talk about the episode. Sorry for the sandbagging, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what this episode did and why it's, magnificent. Now, as much as I want to talk about this scene with Garfield and all that, I really want to talk about the Al segment in this episode. His entire scene with Priscilla here, or not Priscilla, I'm getting mistaken, with his entire scene with Capella, okay? And she was shape-shifting as Priscilla. It is such a creepy sequence. It's such a good scene, honestly, because it showcases the absolute disgusting nature of Capella, the Archbishop of Lust, and how she is able to read people just by seeing their body movements, which is a very incredible utility to have on your side. Like, let me explain, okay? We've already seen Capella's feats here and there. She obviously has cursed dragon blood. She can morph people into different creatures and stuff, like turn people either into a dragon, turn people into a regular, like, mob beast. She can morph their body to make it look really disgusting and grotesque. Let's look at, like, what happened to Subaru or Crush. You know, she is capable of manipulating her body and even manipulating others. She obviously is the sin of lust. We know that one. And her very persona gives off this vibe that she is, let's see, vehemently against love, or in this case, the depiction of the body, despite what her sin represents. There's a lot more nuance to her, a lot more depth, but I'm simplifying it a lot. But her character is very fascinating, and she is incredibly powerful, and has basically massive regen under her toolset as well. We saw her literally regen in this episode and previous episodes. She's ridiculous. Like, she is actually insane. Like, the only way I could say that you could probably really take her down, and this isn't a spoiler, this is just common sense discussion, but only thing you could theoretically assume is most likely fire would be able to stop her. Like, if you were to burn her wounds and stuff enough, maybe it would stop the regeneration. It's a common thing you see in RPGs and stuff, like fire used to stop regeneration. Maybe that is the trick, but regardless of that, it seems more or less she's immortal. She could come back basically as mincemeat. I mean, we literally see Al make her turn into mincemeat, and she's completely A-okay. She just comes back completely fine, regenerates everything just A-okay, so even attacking her brain, her head, etc. is not enough to stop her. She regenerates basically from anything. She's basically Majin Buu in the ReZero universe, which is horrifying to really think about. But, anyways, I want to talk about her ability to read people. So I think her interaction with Al here says a lot about her character that a lot of people probably don't give her enough credit for. That she is able to analyze someone's entire body language and movement in their voice and get a good read on what they're into such a accurate way. Like, she literally turns into Priscilla. And Al even asked the question, like, when did you meet the princess? And she straight up admits, I have never met her. I have not even been aware of her. I've never seen her, been aware of her. She just turned into someone that Al would obviously love and be into. And I think this is a very scary power, because obviously she's not reading his mind or anything. She's just able to read how he is as a person. And this is what she turned into. And the fact that she was able to get such an accurate read on Priscilla and what Al is into is frightening. Very frightening ability. It shows that she can play mind games with people to a higher degree if she really wants to, if she wants to play a long con of turning into people, because she can read their personalities just so well. It's scary, dude. It's actually terrifying. And I think that I love the bouncing of personalities between Al and Capella in this episode, because it's a very different, like, show-off than we saw with Subaru and Capella, you know, in the first half of Season 3. The overall discussion between them is just very fascinating, because Al, at this point in time within the story, he looks weak. He's a one-armed swordsman. That's it. And this man can use a little bit of earth magic. But he looks like he really isn't much in comparison to what we see from other characters within ReZero. But he is putting up a very decent fight against Capella, which is shocking, because obviously up to this point in time, if you're anime only, Al's been more or less a nothing burger character. I mean, he appeared in Season 1 briefly, but he didn't really have a big role. Obviously, there's a lot more to him than that, but I'm talking about from an anime perspective, just him coming in and basically doing stuff he did in this episode. It's gonna shock a lot of people, and it's gonna be like, wait, whoa, Al's kind of strong. But also, what what Capella mentions and briefly hints at in this episode kind of lays out the groundwork of what type of person Al is as well. She implies that Al is the one that released the Watergate to allow the water to flood into the city. And for those that don't remember, basically at the end of Core 1 of Season 3, Subaru was in a desperate fight and struggle with Capella and all that, and the city was kind of getting overrun by the Sin Archbishops, and then the water came in and swept everybody away. At that point in time, they assumed that it was one of the Archbishops doing it, but in reality, it was some mysterious third party. It was briefly implied who it was, but it was never directly said. But this episode basically spells it out for you that Al is someone that did straight up release the Watergate, allowed the water to flow in the city to give Subaru the advantage in that moment to turn it on their side, but also he is the one that was executing the council that had information on the witch's corpse and everything, which I think is very important to discuss, because the fact that Al did that obviously isn't necessarily quote-unquote a good thing. That's not what you would consider a hero to do. That is not something you would consider a good person to do. And Priscilla even acknowledges, like literally in the first episode of Core 2 of Season 3, that Al does things that she doesn't even know. He's very shady, he's very secretive, she's even aware of that. She implies that in the first episode of Core 2 of Season 3. So we know Al's been doing things behind the scenes. Priscilla's aware he's doing stuff, she just doesn't know exactly what. And so Al's been scheming behind the scenes. He's been doing things to kind of set the stage, so to speak, to make everything's kind of go right in a proper way. If that turns out to be a good or bad thing, who really knows? But the point is that Al seems to be able to get ahead of some issues and problems before they necessarily happen, because obviously Capella was probably looking for the council members that were slaughtered by Al, that was revealed in this episode, but he got to him first. And so that implies that he was cognitive enough to be aware that they were being searched for. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily take someone with a huge intellect to want to shut them down or get rid of them, but the fact that he knew all the people that was involved makes you wonder what's really going on there. There's just a lot of question marks. But anyways, Al is a character, very fascinating. I love his depiction in this episode. I love Capella's character acting. It is just amazing. Like, straight up, like, love it, man. I love ReZero, and I love just getting to talk about these characters and gush about them, even if it is not Subaru I'm talking about. Which, I guess, at long last, let's talk about Garfield's fight. This is such a good segment that honestly, it blows my mind how good it is. Like, I can't believe that this is something in ReZero. I mean, I remember reading this years ago, and I like this fight. Like, I really do like this fight in the light novel and web novel, but a lot of people, when they read the light novel, web novel, they looked at this fight as more or less, like, it was good character development, but it was like, it wasn't as crazy as the stuff going on with Capella and Al, or the stuff with Gluttony and Otto, or even the stuff with Subaru. It just, the Garfield fight seemed more or less the weakest section of the novel at this point in time. But the fact that this segment has gotten so much love in the anime makes me so happy, because Garfield has become quite a fan favorite, I think, for a lot of anime-onlys, and especially readers of the original source. Garfield's a fan favorite, and I'm just glad to see him get a lot of respect. I'm glad to see him get a nice action sequence that is just beautiful. I love the depiction of, like, the bones breaking and stuff here. I really just love this episode, man. Like, just to get straight up to it, this fight is just leaps and bounds beyond the original source as best as it possibly can be with animation. This is just great, dude. Like, I'm very happy how much they cooked for this scene. Like, it is one of the scenes that a lot of people kind of disregarded or didn't care about within the novel, and I'm glad to see a lot of people loving it and finding some new appreciation for Garfield thanks to the character development he also received in this episode. I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of development from this fight as well. Him becoming a better man, him standing up to the plate and defending those behind him, being the self-proclaimed shield and all that, him, overcoming his trauma and PTSD thanks to Elsa. There's just a lot about this episode that develops Garfield's character and continues the progression that was laid out basically since the beginning of Season 3. Just straight up great segment. Now, with that being said, let's get into the Gluttony stuff. So, Gluttony in this episode, more or less, if I had to be completely blunt here, I think Gluttony is the least worked on part of the episode. Like, if I'm comparing it to the Capella and Al fight to, obviously what we had with Garfield, I think that Gluttony, facing off against the characters like Felt and Otto and stuff, is the least focused on in the episode. Even though it does have a lot of scenes, like it does take up a little chunk of the episode, I think more or less the episode, it's good because of the tension. I think that's more or less what it's trying to do, because Gluttony is a mysterious character. He's someone that, the damage he can cause with his authority to erase people's names and memories is scary, because you know for a fact that someone is probably going to lose something as time goes on. We just don't know who yet, and that is the danger of him. You don't necessarily worry about maybe someone dying, you worry about them going into like a coma-like state like Rim. We don't want another thing like that, so to speak. So that is more or less the tension of the fight than anything else. Now, there is some lore drop with this episode with him. Gluttony mentions that there is Rui. He mentions it right here, and we don't know who that is. This is a completely new character, but it makes you wonder, who is he talking about? We know that there is, at this point in time within the story, there's two Gluttonies. We know this. I mean, we've seen them. There's two different fights going on with Gluttony right now, two different names. And now him mentioning Rui, it starts to make you wonder, wait a minute, like, is there another Gluttony? Like, that's what you start to assume, because obviously that name is very significant, and him mentioning stuff like this, that's what it implies. So, yeah, you're like, wait, so there's three Gluttonies, and that means that there's a shadow mysterious figure going on behind the scenes that nobody's even aware of yet, that's potentially causing problems. That's scary. So, we'll see where that one goes. But yeah, overall, man, this episode is great. We have a after-credit scene, post-credit scene, so to speak, with Wilhelm as well. Him about to fight his wife, and I'm going to be honest with you, one of my favorite segments of the light novel for Arc 5. I don't know if it's everybody's personal favorite, but I like Wilhelm as a character. I've always loved him, and I love his, like, story. I love his connection with his wife and Reinhardt and everything. And so, seeing his fight with his wife is very emotional, and I hope they cook. Please let them cook next week. I hope they cook for this fight. But I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. May all of you have a fantastic day or night wherever you live. Chibi out.